Welcome to the Home Business Podcast with Richard Captain Henderson, publisher of Home Business Magazine, and Sherilyn Colleen, managing editor. This how-to show helps you successfully operate your home-based business.
Greetings and welcome to the Home Business Podcast. I'm Richard Captain Henderson, your skipper at Home Business TV.
And I'm Lynn, your co-host.
Let's gear for sea and get it away. You're developing a new product or service and your business is taking off, but you may be ignoring a key part of your business.
Yes, that part is trademarking. Without even knowing it, you could have key designs or phrases that need trademark protections.
The world of trademarking is tricky, such as trademark rights arising out of use or how others might even steal your trademark.
But trademarking is not that complicated, and with a little time and work, you'll be on your way to trademark protections.
Helping us to navigate trademarking today is Paige Mills, who has extensive litigation experience in complex intellectual property and technology matters.
So greetings, Paige Mills. Welcome to the Home Business Podcast. Say hello.
Hello. Good to see you all today.
Yeah, good to see you too.
So we like to talk to guests on where they're connecting in from, and you are connecting in from Nashville.
I am.
Great part of the world. A lot of startups in Nashville too. It's kind of a entrepreneur's hub down there, I hear.
Yes, it is. And we've got, of course, we're known as the home of country music, but we've got a lot of thriving industries here in Nashville, and healthcare and healthcare IT. So intellectual property is important around here.
Well, thanks for connecting in.
Oh, I'm happy to do it.
Paige, let's get started with defining terms. What are the differences between copyrights and trademarks?
That's a great question, and it's always the first question because clients are often confused about the differences in the different types of intellectual property. Trademarks are a phrase or a symbol or a word, or it can be a smell, it can be a motion, any of those things that represent the source of goods and services. So whereas a copyright is the intellectual property protection that is given to a creative venture, like the writing of a novel or the writing of a song. That is what is copyrighted. So the difference is the trademark is representing the source of goods and services. The copyright is going to protect a creative work.
So they're kind of related by the trademark sort of starts it all in your business, or what's kind of a foundation for it. And then the copyrights kind of maybe looked at as ongoing creation from that business. Like, for example, we've trademarked Home Business and Home Business Magazine, and we copyright each issue of the magazine. Is that kind of big picture?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Most businesses have both, and even a business that's not creating creative content like your magazine, but most businesses have copyrights. For example, their website should be copyrighted. Their marketing materials might be copyrighted, but any sort of creative work should be copyrighted to be absolutely safe.
Well, Paige, it's probably not as complicated as people think, but briefly, what is the process for obtaining a copyright or trademark?
Okay, for both of those, you obtain the trademark protection or the copyright protection by actually using, in the case of a trademark, using the mark in commerce for the sale of goods. Once you actually do that, you have what's called a common law trademark. For copyrights, when you take your idea and turn it into a tangible thing, like a magazine or like a website, that is a common law copyright once it's reduced to a tangible form. So you have protection, but to have the most inclusive and the best protection is to actually register it. And the way you register copyrights and trademarks are through, in the case of trademarks, through the United States Patent and Trademark Office. They have a website that you can register the mark and follow that mark through all the process of getting registered and keeping it, filing the appropriate maintenance documents to keep it registered. Copyrights, on the other hand, are handled by the U.S. Copyright Office, but it's a similar process. You're filling out forms, you're providing them with copies of what it is that's to be copyrighted. In both cases, the government will analyze what you have put forward, let you know if there are problems or legal issues that need to be resolved, and upon the end, hopefully you get a registration out of it.
A key thing for the guest to understand is that, these are important, and there's processes, but they're not overwhelming. They're pretty well defined. I've gone through them before, and everybody's following the same process. And I guess what I've seen a lot of this is automated online too.
Yes, that's exactly right. It is not that difficult. What can be difficult is figuring out what needs to be trademarked or copyrighted, and identifying the IP that needs protecting. But the actual process itself is not that difficult, as you point out. They've got excellent instructions and FAQs, and it's not difficult.
Right. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about it later on. Before moving on to our next topic, I'd like to highlight this show's sponsor, Deborah Kay of Global Venture Services. Deborah Kay is one of the network marketing industry's top executives. She has worked with hundreds of aspiring home-based entrepreneurs to achieve business success. She has a simple system that you can follow. For more info, visit www.workparttimelivefulltime.com or our podcast website for more information on sponsors.
Now, I understand that a trademarking right arises from use rather than registration. Paige, when would a business owner want to obtain a trademark?
Well, you want to, first of all, having trademarks is important, as is all intellectual property, because that is where your business is deriving its value, and that's how you're building value. If you can build up intellectual property, that's going to maximize the value of your business and give you something to sell later on if you want to sell. So the way you have trademarks is by use, as you just said, and you pick a phrase, you pick a design, you pick a word, and you're going to try and build value in the minds of consumers. And have them associate that with you as the source of goods and services. So every business wants to do that. They want consumers, whoever your consumer is, you want them to associate your business with your services and that particular trademark.
Now, can I ask a question on this? Because it kind of confused me at first, but maybe this will help clear up some of this, in that trademarks are looked at from the consumer's perspective. It's the confusion. It's clearing up confusion in their mind about your product. So, is that safe? Is that kind of a safe way to look at this from trademarking, that it's done from the consumer's perspective?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. A lot of times people think, well, the reason I'm getting this trademark is it's for me, it's to protect this mark. But the way the law looks at it is trademark law is all designed to eliminate consumer confusion so that a consumer knows what they're getting and where it's coming from. And if someone is using trademarks in a way that, screws that up and confuses consumers, that is when you have an actionable issue under trademark law.
Well, that I should probably make a disclaimer here that also, because you're providing some great advice, and we'll get your website later on. But for the guest, that when you're navigating the world of trademarks and copyrights, you should seek out legal advice to make sure you're, dotting your I's and crossing the T's the right way. But let's talk a little bit more about that. With trademarking, it's all about protecting your business. Paige, exactly what protections does a trademark bring to a business's intellectual property?
Okay. Well, a registration is, as we were saying, you have your trademark rights when you start to use it. You have those rights in the geographic area you've used it in. So if you have a Florida business, for example, that is, let's say it's a local type business like a hair salon or a bowling alley, if you've used a particular mark in Florida for those services, you have trademark rights in a little ambit around the geographic area you've used it in. Now, if someone in Oregon wants to use that same mark for those same services, they've got a little ambit around their area. You're not interfering with each other because it's a very localized business, but you both have built up rights in it. That is not ideal, because if you want to really have a mark that you're going to be able to sell and you're going to be able to really take, to the next level, you want exclusive rights in that mark. So that's the reason you try to register. So once you have taken your little localized business that is actually in interstate commerce, and you want to really maximize the value of that mark, you want to get it federally registered. Once you have a federal registration for that mark, you have superior rights for that mark for those goods and services in all 50 states of the United States. So anybody that comes later is, you have superior rights and you can stop that. You'll have a federal registration that is a piece of property like just about any other piece of property. You can sell it, you can assign it, and it builds up value for your business. So once the main reason you register is for that 50 state protection. It also makes it easier for others to find you, so they don't select a mark that's too close to yours. Most people know to check and, before they try to develop a mark, at least to look at the Patent and Trademark Office. If you're there, they're going to pick something else, which is a very cheap protection, instead of having to chase down other users that you want to get off the mark.
Well, that's a really good point. You brought up the online database. I brought to bring up just another point, that a key point of the federal is that it's a national trademark, and that it's getting you in all 50 in all 50 states, and so that's a common point then of trademarking, because so many particularly maybe online businesses that are e-commerce related, they're using that mark across all 50 states, and sometimes even internationally. I don't want to go into the international market because that's a real mess. I think it's kind of a Wild West when you go international, and I'm not sure what protections you have. It's all about, who's going to enforce them outside of the United States. But, at least through federal trademarking, you're protecting yourself within the contiguous United States.
That's right. And with your federal registration, that can make it easier to get protection elsewhere. You can take that federal registration and you can, take it to the EU and do certain filings that will get you in a bunch of countries at once. You're right, that is sort of beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but it's another reason to get your federal registration. If you do plan on going outside the United States, it can ease that process. Another reason you would want to do it is if you are a business that is global in scope, and you're importing goods or exporting goods, you can register that mark at the Border Patrol or with the customs folks, and they can be on the lookout for counterfeit goods of your mark coming in and out. So that allows further protection in that regard. The federal registration will also let you use the little R in the circle, the registration symbol. Without that federal registration, you're not allowed to use that. So that's another benefit. It just gives more heft and strength to your mark, and people are familiar with that R, and they recognize that it gives the trademark more strength. And but mainly your goal is to be distinct with that mark, and once you've got that registration, it is easier to police and to keep others from picking that mark or infringing on the mark. And the cheapest way to do that is to keep them from selecting a similar mark in the first place. And then that registration goes a long way sometimes to doing that.
Well, I think, it's just in general, I think that just having a trademark and communicating that gives your business credibility.
Absolutely.
It's credibility in the mind of the consumer. And so along with protecting yourself, I think it can also, help build your business because it's building credibility.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly right. And it's going to help you. It's going to going through that process and clearing a brand and getting a distinctive brand. All of that is helping that consumer identify you and your goods and services, and that's what that's the goal. Let's get more customers. So.
Yeah, I think also when you're researching it, you might find somebody that's a little bit too close already to that trademark you're trying to do, and you can tweak it a little bit to maintain that distinctiveness, so you avoid conflicts in the future.
That's right, and that brings up a good point for small business owners. If you're on the front end of this and you're selecting a mark, we really do recommend that you put a lot of time and thought into picking that mark and picking one that is not going to be a headache that you're not going to be too close to existing marks, and that it's going to be distinctive enough that you can, that there are not going to be too many people too close to it.
I think the legal case study they used was the word blue jeans. Right. That kind of brings us to the point. We kind of ran into a similar thing ourselves with home business. Okay. What exactly is, home business? And yes, you can do magazines. So, when you get, I guess what the term is, what it's just called descriptive.
Exactly.
That can create some issues.
That's a really good point. I mean, what a trademark lawyer will tell you is you want a distinctive, highly distinctive mark. And what that is talking about is there's a continuum of strength that trademarks have. On the low end, or the weakest mark, or not even, it can't even be a mark, and that is a generic mark. So if you can't have a business, a bowling alley, and call it bowling alley, and have any trademark significance at all, because every competitor is allowed to use those words to describe a bowling alley. We don't co-opt words and keep people from describing their business. So it has no trademark significance, and it never will. Next up on the continuum are descriptive marks, as you just mentioned. Home business, for targeted towards home business consumers, can be viewed as descriptive, and you may draw what is a merely descriptive refusal from the trademark office, and the way you get around that is by coupling it with a distinct design or by using it for sufficient time.
Yeah, that's kind of what we've done.
Right. We'll start to see it as you instead of the descriptive words home business.
Yeah, that's where it gets a little bit tricky. So, we want to make sure you seek out good legal advice when, wading through this as you're putting your application in.
Right. And so then up on the higher scale, you have suggestive marks and arbitrary and fanciful. And any trademark lawyer is going to want to steer you to that end of the spectrum, because it's going to be easier to register, easier to protect. And so a suggestive mark might be like Burger King or something like that. So it's suggesting a little something about what they do, but it's not purely descriptive. And then arbitrary and fanciful are just made up, coined words like Exxon or Kodak or Apple for computers. Apples have no relationship to computers, therefore it's arbitrary. Those types of marks, the made up marks, the completely arbitrary marks, are the strongest, and that's where you're going to be able to develop the most value in a trademark.
Right.
So in addition to time and complexity, the other key barrier to trademarking is cost. Paige, what approximately are the costs associated with trademark protection?
Well, it is a good idea to have a trademark lawyer if you are talking about investing a great deal of money in building a brand. You're going to want to go through all these with somebody that understands these issues, so you don't make any missteps. So it is recommended that you hire trademark counsel. Aside from that, just the costs of registering are not very great. Your government filing fees are around $275 per class of goods or services. So if you are registering, say, a mark for that you're going to, let's call it Penguin, and we're going to use it on clothing, and we're going to use it on coolers, and we're going to use it on, I don't know, books. Those are 3 different classes of goods and services, so you have to pay around $275 per class as your filing fees. And assuming there's no legal issues with that, it sails through. That's the basic cost of the registration.
So you're saying that if it's not too complicated and you don't seek out legal advice, is this something you could attempt to do online by yourself?
It is.
Filling out the forms, and they'll guide you whether you have different classes, and I guess that if you run into some barriers or whatever, you can seek out some counsel on that.
That's exactly right. If you the reason you might want to talk to counsel first is to make sure you're picking a mark, as we talked about, somewhere on the upper end of that spectrum, because it'll be cheaper and easier to, on the long run, to build up value and protect. Mm-hmm. But many folks come to us and they've been using a mark for a long time and they're wedded to their mark. And we, can help that if they're hitting up against barriers. The trademark office, the lawyer can help you maybe maneuver around some of those. But if you don't have any major issues, yes, it isn't that difficult to fill out your trademark application online at the uspto.gov, and they've got lots of great instructions and FAQs, and you can totally figure that out.
Well, so end on just a little bit more on the risk. It's all about balancing risk versus returns. I know we've talked a little bit about that, but if you don't have a trademark page, what risk does a business owner take if she or he doesn't invest the time and money into a trademark?
Well, as we were saying, if you will have a trademark of some kind, if you are using it in business. Now, whether it's valuable or not has to do with some of these things we've talked about. Is it distinctive? Is it higher up on that scale? Is it, have you protected it in a wide enough area, by registration as opposed to just use? So the risk is sort of the flip side of the advantages that we were talking about a bit ago. If you do not register your mark, then other people can select that mark, or they'll select something that's confusingly similar to it. And before you know it, you've got 5 or 6 different businesses out there that are sort of similar to yours, using pretty similar marks, and customers are getting confused.
So in my case, I could have Home Business Magazine and say 3 or 4 other people out there started a Home Business Magazine too. We're all in use. But if I hadn't gotten the trademark, then they could challenge that trademark. But if I'm using it and I got the trademark first, then that's reducing the risk, and I'll get the chance of prevailing on the any trademark disputes.
Yes, that's exactly right. Once you've got that registration, and these 4 or 5 others crop up, your lawyer or you will write them a letter and you say, look, I have the superior rights in this trademark. Here's my
That brings back some memories. I've actually done that before. Yeah.
And hopefully if they, if you're dealing with somebody that understands the landscape, they'll have to change. And you obviously don't want to be the person on that end of the problem, because you've invested a lot of money. You've got marketing materials, you've got a website, you've got customers that know you by name. So changing has a lot of cost, and
that's a risk right there.
Absolutely,
a big risk.
And particularly, you know, the larger you get and the larger the company is, if we're talking about, say, a slogan, for example, if a company has spent $50,000 or $60,000 on a product launch, and, you know, we find out afterwards, which is when you do not want to find out about somebody that's got, you know, very similar rights in a similar mark.
It could put you out of business.
It can put you out of business. It can, you know, it can cost people's jobs for not seeing that on the front end. So it is really important to clear a mark and before you invest in it, and once you've cleared it, to register it, because that is going to just sort of give it some armor that will keep other folks away from it. And that's the cheapest kind of protection there is.
Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Absolutely. And avoiding litigation, avoiding problems is absolutely the best way to go. So speaking as a litigator, so that's registration can be very cheap insurance to sort of protect your mark and to keep it strong, so that you do not have to go out and test that and get rid of a bunch of junior users who are confusing your customers.
Yes, avoid litigation at all cost.
Absolutely. But if you can't, we're here to help, you know.
Great.
So
Paige Mills, this has been a great discussion on trademark fundamentals. Do you have any final points you would like to share?
Well, I would just say it is so important for small businesses, for any business, to identify that intellectual property and to protect it, because that intellectual property is what's going to give your business legs. Even if you don't invent products, you've got intellectual property, you've got trademarks, you've got copyrights, whether it's even just your website, or your designs on your T-shirts, whatever it is you're selling. If you can protect those, you will go a long way towards building value in that business and growing a business. So do spend some time thinking, what intellectual property do I have and how do I protect it?
So all you small micro home businesses out there, this means you. Everybody needs trademark protection. Well, Paige Mills, thanks for being such a great guest on the Home Business Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
To learn more about Paige Mills and support for your trademarking needs, visit www.bassberry.com or our podcast website for more information on guests.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Home Business Podcast. Share your feedback with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and at our website, homebusinessmag.com.
Visit the website for information on advertising, subscribe to our newsletter. Please visit our sponsors. For more info, visit homebusinessmag.com or the expo at homebusinessexpo.com.
I'm Richard Captain Henderson saying anchors away.
We'll talk with you soon. Until then,
make it a great home-based biz day.